Do you think it's okay for a Christian to have a lot of money? You have over 90, close to 100 restaurants.
Yes, sir.
In 12 states.
Yeah. The question myself, am I a business guy or am I a politics guy?
Somebody gave you $100 million right now. What would you do for the city of Wichita? This episode is brought to you by Ameritrust Credit Union. Jon Rolph, what's going on, brother?
How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you for being on episode 3 of Face to Face.
Delighted
Delighted
to be here.
Come on. So
Yeah.
First of all, Jon, a lot of people know you as the guy who you're the restaurant guy. You have over 90, close to 100 restaurants.
Yes, sir.
In 12 states.
Yep.
Right. That's where you're at now. So we're about to backtrack.
Okay.
All right. Where did it all start?
We got a fun story. My uncle was teaching high school in Great Bend, Kansas, and one of his high school classmates, not the smartest kid in the class, was the third Pizza Hut franchisee in Hays, Kansas. And they were back for Christmas, and he said, "You wouldn't believe how much money I'm making selling pizza." And I think my uncle was making, between coaching and teaching, something around $6,000 a year. He said, "Hey, I'd love to meet the Carney brothers in Wichita." And they got an introduction. They were given Eastern Iowa. They literally drove up to Minneapolis, Kansas, where my dad and uncle were from, and raised a little bit of money. Then drove to Coralville, Iowa, parked a pop-up tent and a campsite by the payphone, used that number with the bank. My aunts took turns watching the phone for when the bank called to approve the loan. And then my uncle literally built his first Pizza Hut in Coralville, Iowa. And then we went from there. We grew out.
You guys started in Pizza Hut world.
Yeah.
Your uncle and your dad.
Yep.
Okay.
And my dad's 11 years younger, so he came on the scene a little bit later.
Okay.
Rolled his first pizza over 50 years ago.
Okay.
And
how many Pizza Hut franchises did you guys own?
Well, so my uncle built out that Pizza Hut franchise, threw it in when Pizza Hut went public, ended up becoming national director of operations. That's why we live here in Wichita, because he's part of Pizza Hut headquarters, which was here at that time. And then left after 3 years, started opening Pizza Huts with my dad. And they got up to 26 Pizza Huts and sold those in 94.
So you guys had 26 Pizza Huts at one point.
Yeah,
okay.
out of Wichita, and they were in Virginia and Florida, running them out of Wichita, of all things. But they started Carlos O'Kelly's in 1981. And so really, in those early years, it was Carlos O'Kelly's and Pizza Hut. Then they sold out a Pizza Hut in the 90s. They actually started a publicly traded restaurant REIT called U.S. Restaurant Properties. It's still around. Sold out of that, bought into Applebee's. And we've been Applebee's and Carlos. That's when I came on the scene in 2002.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you real quick, though. So we're talking 96, 02. What are you around this? Are you in high school, college?
Yeah, so Carlos O'Kelly's was started when I was 2 years old.
Okay.
Then 97 is when I graduated from high school at Wichita Collegiate.
Okay, let's start right there.
Yeah.
So now in 97, you're seeing 24, 25 locations with Pizza Hut.
Yeah, we've actually would have sold out the Pizza Huts at that point because we sold out in 94.
Okay, but during your time in high school, though, what were you thinking seeing your uncle and your dad run all these? Were you thinking, I want to be in this business one day? Were you ever employed by any of these locations? Go ahead and talk about that.
You know, it's funny. So my earliest memory of working in a restaurant was when we opened the Carlos O'Kelly's in Lawrence, Kansas. Okay. I went up and I worked the booth where we sold T-shirts and all that stuff and had a good time doing that. I was about 11 years old.
They had you working at 11 years old.
Yeah. Which was a great time. But, you know, I never had a real natural business curiosity. I was always a little more creative oriented. I was into acting and then film.
You went to film school, right?
Yeah, I went to Baylor to study film.
Okay.
Later on, as we were diagnosing my oldest son with dyslexia, I realized that I am also dyslexic, which is why I gravitated away from majors and things where you would read and went into that creative element. So never thought I'd come back to Wichita. Always loved Wichita. It wasn't that I didn't want to. Yeah. It's just film was in Los Angeles, so I thought that's where I'd end up. Okay, and when did you make that decision to say, I want to get out of film and go into the restaurant business? You know, there was never a date, but what happened was a kind of a slow iteration. You know, first I met the guy who's the son of the chancellor of Baylor, was a guy named Kevin Reynolds. He created that. He was the director for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner and Waterworld. And he said, hey, before you come out to L.A., I want you to experience some things that happen outside of L.A. Because everybody gets to L.A. as fast as they can, and there's a lack of creativity because we're all experiencing the same things. And so when I had a chance to go intern following college, in Washington, D.C., I knew, okay, this is going to help give me some experiences that would be helpful when I go make movies. Yeah. During that experience, I realized, man, I have this great friendship with my dad. I was experiencing life with him as a peer. You're always father-son, but as adults. And I was like, before I go to L.A., why don't I go learn business from him? Why don't I be his friend and come back to Wichita for 6 months, and then I'll go to L.A.
For film, yeah.
Yeah, and then it was slowly through that experience that I let go of that dream and moved towards staying here.
Okay, this is amazing right now. So I just have so many things I want to ask, but the first thing I wanted to ask was, do you when you were growing up, there was a lot of probably money, right? You got probably on the privileged side. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs have that story of we came from nothing and all that stuff. What pressure did it put on you to keep the finances maybe going in your family? Like, was there ever a moment to where you were like, I don't want to follow in my dad's footsteps because he wasn't, he did restaurants and I don't want to do restaurants. I want to make a name for myself. Were you ever fear of like being the daddy's boy when it comes to having the money and things like that?
I wasn't. My dad and uncle, a lot of times people call them entrepreneurs because they started that business from nothing. But they always thought of themselves as stewards, and that spirit really came through in our house. Their identity wasn't necessarily in the restaurant. It wasn't in their success in the restaurant. And so neither of them lived to the level of the economic success that they were having. And that bleeds down into your kids. So I'd say my sister and I and my cousins never found our identity in our parents' success. We were able to enjoy a lot of things in life because of it. Which we understood. But, one thing my parents always just hammered in our heads is every opportunity that we have and that we experienced was coming from the people that were working in the restaurants. And so when I actually came back into the business, they started me as a backline prep cook at the Wichita West Carlos O'Kelly's. And so I was back there making salsa and ground beef and things like that.
So it wasn't the whole situation where daddy was like, hey, you're going to come in and you're going to be VP and you're going to be managing all these people. You came in straight up working.
Yeah, working. And the funny thing is they had nicknamed me Spoon before I showed up. So they're like, when's Spoon start? And what are we going to have Spoon do?
And why?
The thought being that I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth.
How'd that make you feel?
Well, they didn't tell me. They liked me enough by the time I left. They're like, hey, we got to tell you, we had nicknamed you Spoon before you ever came.
They never even told you.
Yeah. They told me at the end because I think they came in, they were surprised, again, just at the level of respect I had for the work that they did, the curiosity, the work ethic, but the appreciation I had for what they did day in and day out. And again, that was just hammered in from the beginning. You always heard the stories about when my dad and mom would work a pizza together and how hard that was and the people that they saw come up through hard work. And so hard work was just a value that was inside of our family. And that really just set me on the right path when I came back into the business.
I have a question going back to the silver spoon thing. You can't control, right, being the silver spoon boy. So what advice would you give to somebody that has successful parents, but them themselves want to be successful? But unfortunately, but they were just, led with whether it's money, provision, things like that. What advice would you give somebody that has the silver spoon?
Well, it's probably advice that's true for everybody, right? Because you come from families that have reputations, good or bad, that people have preconceptions based on where you live or what you do or what your parents do. And all you can do is get inside and start to figure out who you are and begin to be confident in that. That's not defined by the preconceptions that people have. And you live out of that, and as people get to know you, those things come through. And then the other thing that was always really important to me was I always had a group of friends that I felt known by, completely known by. And I trusted their voice. I gave it way more weight than I gave the voices of people who didn't know me. And someone said, hey, don't count the voices, weigh the voices that are out there in your life. And that really was very helpful for me and has been still today.
That's so good. Okay, so one thing I love about your story is you're a family man. You have 6 kids, right?
That's right. Last time I counted.
I love that. So, being a successful businessman, 6 kids, how do you do it?
A day at a time. I've married very well. My wife's just wonderful. Wonderful mother, wonderful wife. She keeps the big show running. But I've just been fortunate. I have a job that I can make sure I'm home when I need to be and be around. And I have a team that I can trust. that, again, allows me that I don't feel like I have to work 60 hours a week.
Do you ever struggle with work-life balance, right? Working so much that you almost don't have time for your kids?
My struggle is this, is I try and keep so much balance there that I end up not taking care of myself. And so my rhythm in life has been a lot more of go, 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 crash, pick myself back up, go, 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 crash, because I don't take care of myself. And so,
do you ever know when that crash is coming?
I'm starting to get better at those rhythms. Okay. And part of that isn't just knowing what the signposts of when I'm running out of energy. It's more of understanding what are the positive things in my life that I need to be doing that keep me from ever running out of energy. So that's some regular exercise, some time to myself, some retreats, some time with Lauren. And so Lauren and I just this week went and did a 3-day life planning retreat where we talked about rhythms of renewal and replenishment.
In Colorado, right? You talked about that. Yeah. Okay.
And that's real important when you have all these things pulling at you. And you're made like me, which I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. If any of you have ever done the Enneagram,
me too, yeah.
You want to perform. You want to, and if you're a wing 2, you want to give too. And so I'll sacrifice myself to be successful at work and give to the team, to try and be successful at home and give to the family. And what that has created can create is an unhealthy rhythm where I end up depleting myself at inopportune times generally, and that started for me way back in college.
Yeah. So, okay. You see a lot of business owners when they get 15, 20 years in the business, very successful. The one thing that they start losing touch of is their relationship with their wife, especially when kids leave, right? Now they almost forget how to date. They forget how to be with each other. You see a lot of divorces, right? So what would you say to even a struggling relationship when you have a successful husband, wife that's maybe at home, on just how to keep that relationship strong and how to keep just focused? Yeah, what would you say about that?
Well, that's a great question and a tough one to answer. That really takes commitment from both spouses to recognize the seasons of life that you're in and to recognize the need to continue to pursue each other and to try and gauge the level of intimacy in your relationship, how much you still know about each other and what you all are struggling with and how you're coming alongside each other and not just coexisting and managing the business of the family and things like that. So what happens generally in all relationships, whether it's those kind of marriages, is you drift apart a little bit over time. Little things go unreconciled over time. And when you get a break and when you both come up for air, when the kids launch, you realize you don't know each other, or you realize you don't like the person who you're with, who they've become or who you've become. And so that's where a lot of that midlife crisis stuff comes in, because you've generally pounded through whatever's the next thing you're supposed to do. I'm supposed to get married. I'm supposed to have kids. I'm supposed to pursue the career. I'm supposed to get the house. I'm supposed to do this. And you've done all those things. And even if you're very successful, if you forgot about thinking about who you want to become, you can lose those relationships and wake up and be like, how'd I end up this person?
That is so good. Right? Okay, man, great answer. I want to keep talking about that, but we got to keep moving. Okay, no problem. Next thing. So back to the business side of, your career. You told me earlier off camera that you worked for 8 years, kind of was questioning the business, but then you left. Yeah. Talk about that moment.
Well, so I'd made a decision to leave. What happened when I came back, if you remember, I came back just to be friends with my dad. Never was about coming back to be in business. And so when I came back, I thought I was going to go into film. And after I let go of that dream, I got real involved in the community. And I was asking the question myself, am I a business guy or am I a politics guy? And when I went around and asked people, they were like, you're clearly a politics guy. And so Lauren and I decided to talk to 12 friends, some mentors, some good friends, and say, hey, is Jon a business guy or a politics guy? If he's a politics guy, he's going to leave the business and run for mayor. And 12 for 12, they all said, well, you're a politics guy. I decided to wait a week, call them all back, say, do you still think that's the right thing? The first 11 all said yes. I couldn't get a hold of the 12th person, a mutual friend of ours named Marty. Yeah. And was driving home. I was living in Bel Air to list my house to move into the city. I'd already told my dad I was leaving the business, hadn't told anybody else.
To go into politics.
I wasn't sure that that's what I was going to do yet, but I knew I was going to leave the business. Hardest conversation I've ever had with him.
Before you finish the story, would you ever be mayor? Would you ever run for mayor?
I doubt anymore. That's in my story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, go back. Yeah.
Because I knew at that time I was making a choice for the next 15, 20 years of my life. If I was going to be in the business, it was a long-term commitment. Yeah. Well, as I was driving home to list my house, Marty called and he said, hey, you're asking the wrong question. He goes, the question is, are you a leader? And where should you be leading right now? He said, God doesn't pigeonhole us to look at us as a politics guy or a business guy or these is kind of smaller stories. And as soon as he said that, I knew that was the right question to ask. And so I called back all the other 11 people. I said, hey, if I ask the question this way, I'm a leader. Where should I be leading right now, business or politics? 11 for 11 said business.
It's about asking the right questions.
It's about asking the right questions. I turned my whole life, and I'm so glad that it did. I've loved my story since. I'm so glad not to be in the political arena, and it's just been a blessing. And so, one, seeking counsel in your life, but knowing that the treasure hunt is finding the right questions.
Oh, that's so good. So a lot of people don't know. He was mentioning Marty, and Marty was a mutual friend of ours through DC, right?
Yep.
It's an organization where they focus on friendship, right? Faith, focusing on Jesus, a great situation. But in that, they talk about, like I said, they talk about the value of friendship, reconciling, vulnerability. And I just want to ask you a question. A lot of men, especially in their 40s, 50s, 60s, I don't know if they can say, like, I have 5 or 6 close friends, right? A lot of men can be passive. A lot of men can even be greedy. How have you really value the importance of friendship in your life, and what's the effect it's played on your business and your career? Yeah,
so relationships have always been important to me. I mean, part of that's just being an extrovert, is I love being around people and like that. But I took that year, after graduating from Baylor, I'd gotten to know these folks from being student body president at Baylor. I'd gotten into their student leadership forum, to take a year to step back and to think about Jesus, to think about people before I kind of launched into life. Transformed my entire life that year, just slowing down enough to learn about it. And one of the things I learned was I was not very good at loving people. I would have told you that I was. As I got into that and was trying to do it with a group of guys, I was like, I'm not very good at this. I got to get better at this and start working on it. But then I was around these guys who had built huge businesses, or that were at the top of our government, saying, I've done a lot of successful things, but I've never done anything significant. And again, just puzzling me to say, wait, this is the path. I thought for my life to matter, I needed to leave a dent on the world. But to be who I wanted to be, again, this question of who do you want to become, I started saying, I want to be someone with rich, lifelong friendships. That takes work. It takes work to reconcile. It takes work to love, to serve each other. And I want to get good at that. And so I've been practicing that now for 20 years since I've gotten back in my marriage and with some friends. I've had very close friends work with me. I have very close friends who work with me now. Yeah. And I just feel very rich that the fruit that's produced in my life at this point. So
we talked faith earlier. Do you think it's okay for a Christian to have a lot of money?
Yeah, I do. I think, when you look in Scripture, one of the things that oftentimes makes us uncomfortable is Jesus will give different commands to people in the same situation. So for someone who's giving a lot of money away, or has money, he may say, you need to give a lot of money away. For someone who's giving a lot of money away and finding their identity on that, he may say, I want you to pursue me in a different way, rein back. He may ask someone to push out and serve more, and someone else to pull in and serve less so they can focus on their family and their relationships. There's this idea, in the old covenant was all about these rules and what we did. And inside the new covenant, it's this reaction and lively relationship with the Holy Spirit. And so it's really, I think you've got to sit there with the Lord and say, hey, how much of my identity is coming in money? What am I doing with money? What do you want me to do with money? Yeah. And is it a tool of which you're engaging with the Lord? The Scriptures never say money in itself is a bad thing. It's the love of money is a bad thing. Yeah. And so you really got to figure out how much of your heart is drawn to that and why, and to have, again, close friends that can help you see, because we really like to sell ourselves on things. Well, no, it's not that, or it's this. To have friends that can really say, hey, I'm seeing this, or search your heart, or why don't you talk about this or think about this. Huh?
Yeah. How do you play, how do you tie faith with your business, right? With the culture and things like that?
So I think any business begins to look a lot like its leader, right? So that's true in all 100 of our restaurants. The staff and the spirit will look like the leader of that restaurant. Well, inside of our organization, faith is a big driver for me in my life. And
so you don't hide it. Everybody knows that you're a man of faith in your business.
Yeah. I mean, no, I don't hide it. I don't necessarily broadcast. There's not a big cross when you walk through the door, in our office. We want it to be very true, what we're living out. And, to me, faith in Jesus is others focused, right? So when we switched our name from Saznak to Thrive, the idea was we're calling ourselves to try and help other people thrive and flourish while they're a part of our company inside of the restaurant industry.
Yep.
And so how can we do that? What can we give them? What kind of culture can we create to help them be the best versions of themselves inside of that? And so we've really, what I hope and what we strive for is to be a really human-centered, purpose-driven company. And that's all driven by the truths that we've learned inside of our faith.
I love that. So that's a great answer, by the way. So you have a lot of Applebee's, right? You're still running with Carlos O'Kelly's. Pizza Hut, no more, sold those out. But one thing you've started is homegrown. You have 5 locations now?
We're building number 5 right now.
You're building number 5 right now. You have 3 in Wichita, 1 in Kansas City, another one in Kansas City that you guys are building. What's the future of homegrown, and what's the future of just a Thrive Management Group?
We're wrestling through all that right now. We experienced a lot of growth through the pandemic that was a little bit unexpected. We ended up buying 2 franchises out, 40 restaurants, almost doubled in size during the middle of the pandemic. And so we're coming out saying, okay, hey, what's important to us? Where do we want to go? Let's regroup and look forward. We know that we have a tiger by the tail with homegrown. It's working really well, not just financially, but how the guest is responding to it and how the people inside of it are flourishing. And so right now we're ramping up the ability to build 4 or 5 of those a year the next couple of years. And we think when we get to 15 to 20, we'll know, is this something we want to own, something that we want to franchise? What's the next leg of that journey look like? But right now we know we need to build some more just to see what the reality of the constraints of that business are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you've been in Wichita for 25 years now?
I moved back in 2002, so that's 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years now in Wichita. You're involved in a lot of different things in Wichita. What do you love most about the city?
I love the people here. I've talked a lot of friends into moving here over time. I love the commute. I love the spirit. I love the history of this town. I love that you can come into Wichita and you can get your arms around it. It's a big enough city where there's a lot to do, but you have access to leaders. If you want to try and move a ball, you have that ability versus going into some of the major metros.
What's one thing you like to see Wichita grow in?
I've always thought the spirit, and we've gotten a lot better at this in the last 10 years, just the spirit to believe that we're worth investing in ourselves. We fight that a lot. We're kind of ho-hum. It's Wichita. Should we really? And we've gotten a lot better at that, but we've still got a long way to go. And the cities that are believing themselves enough to invest in themselves help other people from the outside believe that they're worth investing in themselves.
If somebody gave you $100 million right now, what would you do for the city of Wichita?
I'd probably transform the river bank. We were working on a master plan for the east bank of the river. That's really the big opportunity for us right now that comes once in a generation, maybe once every other generation. Sit there and say, this communal part of our community, this front door, this welcome mat, this heart of our city, what do we want it to look like? What do we want it to reflect? And I'd try and help move that forward.
Okay. I love that, man. All right, so last few questions here. Best advice you've ever gotten from a mentor?
Best advice I've ever gotten from a mentor. Wow, that is a striking question. I've gotten a lot of great advice. Man, I don't know the best advice. I spend a lot of time thinking about purpose and that idea that I was sharing earlier that we just keep doing whatever's next. I realized that I was doing that. So this idea that there's a lot of purpose inside of love and the idea of finding out what it is to be really good at loving other people, receiving love. Around that, there's different advice, but I think that is part of what shaped my direction. The other thing, I get mentored by a guy who's about 60 years older than me. He's in his late 90s now. And when I was 30 and he was 80, he said something to me. He goes, John, I look around, people think that we're in the world of the dying, and when we die, we go to the world of the living. Or sorry, that we're in the world of the living. When we die, we go to the world of the dead. He goes, I look, everything's in decay, that we're in the world of the dying, and when we die, we go to the world of the living. That flipped so much for me because I was really driven by trying to bring the world back to how it should be, right? Back to utopia where there wasn't sadness and there wasn't poverty and there wasn't, how do we knock these things out? And I was frustrated all the time that I couldn't move the needle more. But then when I realized that the invitation is to come in and be the exception to the rule, so bring a little kindness, a little grace, a little joy, a little love into the world, every day is an invitation to do that.
I love
and that drives so much of what we do in the business, so much of what we do in our home, and so much of what I do as an individual, that statement of flipping that on its head probably had as profound an impact as anything anybody ever told me.
That's so good. Okay, what about the worst advice you ever gotten?
The worst advice I've ever gotten. Man, I haven't had a lot of bad mentors in my life. So the worst advice I've ever gotten, nothing comes to mind.
Okay, maybe a common business myth or something you read that's just like, that's not true.
I think there's a lot of people that believe that what you do can help define you and bring growth, and so that comes through a lot of things that we say. So let me say it this way.
Here we go.
Okay, so my kids now, we ask them all the time, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? When I get on an airplane, second question I ask someone or they ask me is, what's your name? What do you do?
Yeah.
Right? There's so much emphasis, so much advice that you get is put on what are you going to do? But in the end of life, it's all about who we were and how we did what we did. It's very little about what we actually accomplished.
It's the impact we made.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you think about all that advice that's front-loaded in focusing more on what you do and some promise that if what you do will bring you life, you can just lose focus on the real treasure in life, which is who you're becoming, how you're doing it, and who you're doing it with.
I love that. Okay, last question here. What does Jon Rolph want to be remembered as? Whenever everything's all said and done, who do you want to be remembered as?
Simply, I just hope people can remember me as someone who loved. So no matter how they encounter me, whether it's my kids, my wife, my friends, people I work with closely, the people I work with at a distance, the people I work with in the community, that would be the one common denominator that would come through is, I could tell Jon loved me, loved other people. I'd love to be defined by that.
Okay. I love that. Jon Rolph, everybody, third episode of Face to Face. How'd you feel?
I loved it, man.
Cool.
It was all about the interviewer. The questions made the whole thing.
That means a lot.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Everybody, here you have it.
Let's go. Here we go.